From character development to introducing new enemies, the RE Remakes 2 and 3 had a lot of missed opportunities. The potential to deliver a perfect game was there, but somehow the developers missed the mark. There are so many opportunities that would have made this game much better, so I made a small list of them. Hello everyone, I'm Reese and welcome to my channel. At the time of this recording, I am well into my 30s, and at this point in my life, I spend a lot of my time reminiscing about the golden eras of video games. I was raised in the 90s, so PS1 is one of my favorite game consoles. And my favorite all-time game series is Resident Evil.
Resident Evil.
Resident Evil 1 released in 1996, followed by Resident Evil 2 in 1998. Although these games used to leave me with nightmares, and until I was a teenager I wouldn't dare play them myself. Nonetheless, when Resident Evil Remake was released in 2002, it blew my mind. This time around I will play Resident Evil Remake myself, and after falling in love with the game, I would finally build the courage to play the old Resident Evil games.
See if you can find any other clues. I'll be examining this.
It was from there where I fell in love with the series, my favorite being Resident Evil Remake. I love everything they did with this remake, from the updated graphics, adding new enemies, and expanding the game to enhance the story. So you can imagine my excitement when Capcom released Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes in 2019 and 2020. I like both of these games. Believe me, I truly think the developers did absolutely well with both of them. However, after a few years of playing them, I feel like there is major missed opportunities with both of these games. When Resident Evil Remake was released in 2002, it did more than just change the camera, voice actors, and controls. It took advantage of the opportunity to make more than just a remake. With the new graphics, new locations, new enemies, cutscenes, extras, and more, Resident Evil Remake is damn near perfect.
Chris, take a piece of the action.
That's not to say Resident Evil 2 and 3 are bad. I just felt like a lot more could have been done with these two. So without further ado, here are 7 missed opportunities of Resident Evil Remakes 2 and 3. Exploring more of Raccoon City. The best part of the original Resident Evil 2 and 3 was the running around the streets of Raccoon City. In today's gaming, some of the best games have a somewhat open world feel to them. Although you are free to walk around Raccoon City during gameplay, for me, most of the time it feels so claustrophobic. Things like Raccoon City Park, the graveyard, City Hall, press office, the clock tower, and the Dead Factory were all sadly cut and removed from the game. Instead of cutting out locations, I think the developers could have taken advantage of opportunity by expanding Raccoon City so that there's more room for exploration. Now, for Resident Evil 3 Remake, this would mean more moments to have Nemesis on your back hunting you down. But that would add more opportunities to fight Nemesis, which would mean more chances to get some exclusive gear. As for the Resident Evil 2 remake, maybe during Leon and Claire's exploration, they run into different kinds of threats, like other survivors, or Echo 6, maybe the USS. Which brings me to my next missed opportunity, adding Operation Raccoon City story. I know, Operation Raccoon City isn't a popular game amongst most fans, and the storyline isn't even canon, but hear me out. Adding in a segment where Echo 6 and the USS agents are roaming around Raccoon City can only make the game better. I'm not asking to have Echo 6 crash into the police station and distract you with gunfire as you're trying to hide from Mr. X. But have a different location where you can actually encounter footage or some type of evidence that they were roaming around the city would have been a nice Easter egg. Imagine when Carlos and Tyrell are on their way to the RPD station they encounter members of USS or Echo 6. That would be badass, and it wouldn't have any major effect on the overall story, thus expanding the story, even tying in Operation Raccoon City. Speaking of tie-ins, if you don't think Operation Raccoon City deserves a tie-in, then this next installment definitely does. Adding Outbreak story and characters. Resident Evil Outbreak series. Yet another Resident Evil red-headed stepchild. Hate it or love it, but the Outbreak series has a lot of fans. With the success of Resident Evil 4 Remake, it's more than likely they're going to remake Resident Evil 5 and 6 before they move on to any other Resident Evil remake projects. Even if Capcom decides to greenlight another remake after that, with the failure of Resident Evil Resistance, it's not likely it's going to be another online co-op game. Code Veronica fans, cross your fingers. The one thing that Outbreak did best was it gave us many characters. Characters whose actions tell a different side of what happened in Raccoon City. Adding these characters will help flesh out the story more. Just like with Operation Raccoon City, I'm not asking to change the game so that Outbreak story can exist. Just more hints towards it. Leave some Easter eggs. At least make the story canon. Imagine seeing a picture of Chief Irons with Oscar the elephant before it got infected. Or, while searching the desk in the RPD station, you come across a nameplate that reads Kevin Ryman. Resident Evil 2 and 3 missed out on a big opportunity. The plot hole of Rebecca Chambers. After the release of Resident Evil Remake in 2002, I would go on to play every Resident Evil game I could get my hands on. And if you're a fan of the series like I am, then you know it's been a roller coaster ride. With the game changer that is Resident Evil 4, to the shift in horror action of Resident Evil 5 and 6, and a complete shift in first person view of Resident Evil 7 and 8, then you can see Capcom has split their Resident Evil fan base in 4. Nonetheless, whichever game style you prefer, they all have one thing in common: plot holes. But for right now, I want to talk about the plot hole that is Rebecca Chambers. Across multiple media, including games, books, and movies, information on what happened to Rebecca hasn't been very clear. Rebecca fought and survived the events of Resident Evil 0, and she made it all the way to the mansion in Resident Evil 1. Now, the true ending of the story is unclear. There are several different endings to the game that includes the survival or death of characters such as Jill, Chris, Barry, and Rebecca Chambers. Supposedly, the canon story is all 4 characters plus Brad survived the mansion's incident and return to the RPD station. In the original and remakes, we pretty much know the whereabouts of all the story's main characters besides Rebecca Chambers. She doesn't make an appearance in any later games, whereas all the other characters do. She is noticeably missing from most content post Resident Evil 1. Is she alive? Is she dead? Did she travel the world to find Billy? Barry makes an appearance in Resident Evil 3 original game, and he makes an appearance in Resident Evil Revelations 2. Chris shows up in Code Veronica, Resident Evil 5, and Resident Evil 6, as well as 7 and 8. Jill makes an appearance in Resident Evil 3, Resident Evil 5, and she's in Resident Evil Revelations. We even know what happens to helicopter pilot Brad, who meets his death in Resident Evil 3. But sadly, we don't know anything about Rebecca. Where is she? Where has she hiding? Has she left the city? If she's still in the city, did Nemesis catch her? How do we know what happened to Rebecca? We haven't even seen her since the first game. I feel like the remakes could have left a note or Easter egg or something pertaining to Rebecca's whereabouts, but sadly they didn't, and that we have another missed opportunity. Crimson Head Zombies. Now, don't get me wrong, the zombies of Resident Evil Remakes 2 and 3 are much better than any zombie that came before it. But I can't help but wonder, what if they added something even better? What I mean is, in Resident Evil 1 Remake, the zombies are barely a challenge once you master the game's mechanics. The tight rooms and hallways, along with the fixed camera angles, made it easy to sit back, wait, and let the slow-moving zombies come to you, allowing you to easily pick them off or just run right past them. And just when it seems like you got a handle on this whole survival horror thing, bam, Crimson Heads has entered the chat. At about a quarter way through the game, Crimson Head zombies are introduced. Unlike the slow-moving normal zombies, these ones are fast and much harder to kill. No more waiting to run around these zombies. You almost always have to kill a Crimson Head every time you come across one. It causes you to take different and longer routes, or avoid certain areas altogether. The addition of the Crimson Head zombies shake the game up in an exciting way and alters the way you play. Resident Evil Remakes 2 and 3 are missing their Crimson Head. Surely the tyrant stalking you in the police station in Resident Evil 2 Remake was an exciting addition, but once you leave the police station, the excitement leaves as well. Resident Evil 3 Remake adds the Nemesis Alpha types and the Pale Heads, while providing slight upgrades to the Drain Demos. I don't know how to say that. The Drain creatures and Hunter Gammas all receive upgrades. All of these only appear in certain parts of the game. None of these raise the stakes or change the way you play the games the way that the Crimson Head zombies did for Resident Evil 1 Remake. Expanding on the side characters' storylines. Now, Resident Evil Remakes 2 and 3 did give more screen time to some side characters such as Kendo, Tyrell, Mikhail, Marvin, Ben, and even Annette Birkin. The Resident Evil 2 Remake went even further with the addition of the Ghost Survivors DLC. Basically a what-if scenario for Robert Kendo, Catherine Warren, Ghost, and Daniel Cortini if they had survived. This was a great way to expand on side character stories, but I have just one problem. Who the fuck cares about these people? This was a major missed opportunity because Capcom showed us that they can make good side character stories that add to the lore of the main game. But instead of using those capabilities to flesh out already established side characters, we got a bunch of new characters that we had no real connections to. With the exception of Robert Kendo, who, based on his first appearance...
Ooh, sorry about that, babe. Hold on. But don't you worry, girlie. You'll be safe in here. I'm keeping a close eye on things.
definitely needed a redo. We could have done without these other characters. Like, what was the point of having a ghost scenario? What if we would have got a scenario where Marvin has to cordon off sections of the police station while fighting off tons of zombies? That would explain why the police station had certain rooms that was boarded up in the first place. Or a scenario where Annette tries to track down William as he goes through different stages of mutation from the G virus. Or a scene where Nikolai enters the lab to find Carlos and Jill. I can name 10 more suitable scenarios that would have been better than what we got. Don't get me wrong, the Ghost Survivor isn't bad for a DLC. However, the developers choosing not to expand on the stories of the more important side characters is a huge missed opportunity. The Brad Vickers story. I know I just talked about not expanding on storylines of side characters, but Brad's story is much different. Not only did they not expand on Brad's story, but they also cut content from it. Resident Evil 3 Remake managed to completely destroy one of the best storylines in the entire franchise. The first time we are introduced to Brad, he's the helicopter pilot that flew Alpha Team to the mansion and practically left them for dead.
No! Don't go!
He then shows up hours later at the end of the game. Brad's nickname is Chicken Heart, and he shows us why in the Resident Evil 3 original when we see him on numerous occasions cowardly running around the city. Well, I guess the city is being overrun by zombies and other scary monsters. On top of that, he's being stalked by Nemesis, so I guess the guy kind of have a reason to be scared shitless. Brad meets his end in the perfect way for the game's main antagonist to appear. Nemesis, who was stalking Brad all around town, shows up and peels his muffin cap back. First of all, Brad deserved to die. Not because he left them for dead in the first game, because he knew Nemesis was stalking him because Nemesis wanted to kill STARS members.
Listen, he's coming for us. We're both gonna die.
What are you saying?
You'll see. He's after STARS members. There's no escape.
And you led him straight to jail, another STARS member for him to kill. Nemesis killing Brad in his first appearance lets us know early on he's not fucking around. Somehow, the developers of Resident Evil 3 Remake saw this and decided it needed a major change. For starters, they made Brad appear to have some type of redemption story instead of being the chicken heart he was in the prior games. In Resident Evil 3 Remake, he warns Jill of Nemesis' arrival, erasing that iconic intro from the Resident Evil 3 original game. And he plays hero by holding off zombies so that Jill can escape.
Then do me a favor. Don't fuck up like I did. Go!
Sadly, Brad dies from a zombie bite off screen, erasing that iconic headshot scene from Resident Evil 3 original game. Now, the change in story wouldn't have felt so wrong if we were given content further exploring Brad's journey. When playing Resident Evil 3 Remake for the first time, when Brad died, I remember thinking to myself, they must have plans to expand his story in the minigame or DLC. But sadly, the DLC never came.
Sorry.
It just didn't make any sense to me. Why cut out such an iconic scene if you don't have plans to replace it with something better? Why even introduce Brad's redemption story if you're not going to follow through with it? I mean, holding the door closed from zombies so Jill can run away doesn't feel like he redeemed himself at all. Brad should have had his own storyline showing his path of redemption that still could have ultimately led up to his timely death. But instead, an iconic character dies off screen, and so does another opportunity to perfect the lore of Resident Evil. There you have it, folks. That was my list. The missed opportunities of Resident Evil Remakes 2 and 3. What do you think about this list? Do you know any missed opportunities you would like to add? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And until next time, see ya.